Welcome back to Mr. DuPage's classroom. This lesson is for my Algebra 2 class. It is 3.7, Notes Day 2. For the following polynomials, determine the degree, the leading coefficient, the end behavior, the maximum number of turning points, the X-intercepts, the Y-intercepts, and sketch a graph. That sounds like a whole heck of a lot of stuff, but a lot of these things are quick and easy to find. Like the first thing, it says to determine the degree. Well, basically what I'm going to do to determine the degree is to say how many times did x plus 3 happen? Once. How many times did x plus 1 happen? Once. How many times did x minus 4 happen? Once. If I add those up, I end up with 3, so my degree is 3. Okay? Now we need to know what the leading coefficient, whether it is positive or negative. All right, so what I'm going to do to figure out whether it's positive or negative is just look at the very beginning here. So my leading coefficient is going to be negative. Based off of my degree, which is that odd or even, it is odd. And what we learned in our last video about our rules list, we can figure out our end behavior. Remember, our end behavior always begins with x approaching negative infinity and x approaching positive infinity. X approaching negative infinity is my left-hand side, and x approaching positive infinity is my right-hand side. Okay? The next thing that we're going to write is the y approaches and y approaches. All of that is exactly the same every single time. So anytime you run into a problem like this, go ahead and write that to start with. Then all we have to figure out is what y approaches depending on the side of the graph. If you remember from our last video, if my degree is odd, which it is in this case, then the y on the bottom, or the right-hand side's y, will get the leading coefficient sign. So it's going to be negative infinity. And if it is odd, the two y's will be opposite one another. So this one would be positive infinity. Well, let's figure out what positive infinity really means. Well, if y is approaching positive infinity, it means it's going up. If it approaches negative infinity, that means it's going down. So on the left-hand side of our graph, I'm going to follow that over here to figure out, does it go up or down? In this case, it goes up. So here's our left side, it's going up. Here's our right side. I'm going to follow my list over to here. That means this is going down. So now I know that on the left-hand side of my graph should go up. On the right-hand side of my graph, it should go down. And we've taken care of 3 of the things we need to figure out already. And again, from yesterday, the maximum number of turning points. So I'm going to write TP for turning points is 1 less than my degree. Well, my degree in this case is 3, so my turning points will be 2. All right? So all those things are pretty quick and easy to figure out. Sketching the graph we'll do here in 1 second after we figure out our x-intercepts and our y-intercept. Now, the x-intercepts will take the most amount of work. It's still really not all that difficult, though. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take x plus 3, set it equal to 0, solve for x. X would equal negative 3. Then I'm going to take x plus 1, set it equal to 0, subtract 1. X would equal negative 1. And finally, x minus 4, set it equal to 0. I could add 4 to both sides, so x would equal 4. Now, those are not my x-intercepts, but those are the numbers I'm going to use to find my x-intercepts. So my x-intercepts will then be negative 3, 0. Let's go ahead and graph that right away. Negative 3 on the x-axis, and y being 0 would be right there. Then my next x-intercept would be negative 1, 0. So I can go right here to negative 1. And then we have 4, 0. So I can go right here to 4. The last thing we need to know in order to graph this successfully is the y-intercept. Well, again, the y-intercept is going to be pretty simple as well. What we're going to do to find our y-intercept is I'm going to use the numbers that are inside the parentheses in the original problem. Okay? So the first number I'm going to use is positive 3. So if I take positive 3, multiply it by positive 1, and multiply that by negative 4, I would be really, really close to my constant. Now, the one thing you have to be careful of is there a negative out front? There is, so I'm going to add a negative 1 to this. What is negative 1 times 3 times 1 times negative 4, it's going to end up being positive 12. Again, just like my x equals negative 3, negative 1, 4, this will not be my y-intercept, but I will use that 12 to tell me my y-intercept. My y-intercept is going to be 0, positive 12. So I can go up here. I'm going to have to add 2 more lines to get to 0, 12. So 0, positive 12 is that point there. Okay? Now to graph it. I know that my left-hand side needs to go up, so I'm going to start up here on my left-hand side. I'm going to go down through my first point. Make a little turn, come through my second point. I'm going to hit my y-intercept, come back down and through my last point, and that is how I make my graph. The left-hand side is going up, the right-hand side is going down, and we are done. Okay? So let's move on and have a little more practice here. Okay? So problem number 2. The first thing I need to find is my degree. How many times did x plus 1 happen? Well, once. X plus 2 happened once, and x minus 3 happened once. So that means I have 3 different terms. So I will have a degree of 3, which is odd again. My leading coefficient, remember that's going to come from whatever's out front. In this case, that is a positive. So my leading coefficient is going to be positive. From there, I can figure out my end behavior. Remember, it always starts with x approaching negative infinity and x approaching positive infinity. The top one is my left-hand side. The bottom one is my right-hand side. I always have y approaches and y approaches. Okay? Now again, I have an odd degree, so the bottom y will get my leading coefficient sign, so positive infinity. It's odd, opposite, so my top y will be the opposite, which is negative infinity. That tells me on my left-hand side, my graph is going to open down. So my left-hand side is here, opens down. My right-hand side opens up, so I'm going to open up. All right, so now that we know how our graph should end, our end behavior, we need to go ahead and find the maximum number of turning points. My turning points are going to be 1 less than my degree, so 2. All right, now that I found my turning points, the next step in our process is to find our x-intercepts. Remember, I'm going to use each term from the top, so x plus 1. I'm going to set that equal to 0. Subtract 1 from both sides, so x would equal negative 1. X plus 2, set that equal to 0. Subtract 2 from both sides, so x equals negative 2. And x minus 3, set that equal to 0. Add 3 to both sides, so x would equal positive 3. Now those are not my x-intercepts, but those will get me to my x-intercepts. Let's go ahead and make our x-intercepts be negative 1, 0, negative 2, 0, and 3, 0. Okay, let's go ahead and plot those points. So negative 2, 0, negative 1, 0, and positive 3, 0. The next thing I need to find is my y-intercept. In order to find my y-intercept, I'm going to take each number, 1, 2, and negative 3, multiply them by each other. So 1 times 2 times negative 3 would get me 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. So my y-intercept would be 0, negative 6. So go to negative 6 on the y-axis. Now I can go ahead and graph. Knowing that the left-hand side goes down, I'm going to start here, start going up. I need to come back through my next point, go through my y-intercept, and finish through my last point. Remember, I only need 2 turning points. Well, I have 1 turning point here, 1 turning point there, so I only have 2. My graph starts down to the left and finishes up to the right, so I am good. Okay? On to the next problem. The next problem is a little bit trickier. It's not overly difficult, but there is a little trick to remember here. Okay? Whenever you have an negative x out in front, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the negative x, and I'm going to change it to x plus 0. Okay? I'm going to change it to x plus 0. There's a couple reasons for that. We'll get into them here in a second. I still can find my leading coefficient the same way. Is there a negative out front? There is, so my leading coefficient's negative. Now my degree, x plus 0 happens once, so that's 1. X plus 4 is 2. X plus 2 is 3. X plus 3 is 4. So my degree is 4, which is even. Okay? Now I can figure out my end behavior. X approaches negative infinity. X approaches positive infinity. So the top row is my left side. The bottom row is my right side. Y approaches. Y approaches. Now even, based off our rules from yesterday, if I have an even degree, then I'm going to follow my leading coefficient for both of my y's. So both of my y's will be negative. That means the left-hand side opens down and the right-hand side opens down. Once I have found my degree and figured out my end behavior, then I look at my maximum number of turning points. Well, my degree is 4, so it's 1 less than that. So I'm going to have 3 times where I'm going to turn on this graph. Okay. The next step is to find our x-intercepts. This is one reason why I added the x plus 0 is for my x-intercepts. I'm going to go ahead and use x plus 0 equals 0, which just means x equals 0, right? Then x plus 4 equals 0. Subtract 4 from both sides. X would equal negative 4. X plus 2 equals 0. Subtract 2. X equals negative 2. And x plus 3 equals 0. Subtract 3. So x would equal negative 3. Okay? Those are not my x-intercepts, but again, those will help me find my x-intercepts. The first one would be 0, 0. Then I would negative 4, 0. Negative 2, 0. And negative 3, 0. A lot of things over here on the left-hand side. So I go negative 4, 0, negative 3, 0, negative 2, 0, and 0, 0. All right. Now you might be able to figure out already just by looking at the graph what my y-intercept would be, but let's go through the same process just to be sure we know what we're talking about. The first number I will use is 0. So it would be 0 times 4 times 2 times 3, and don't forget that I had a negative out front, so I need to add a negative 1 to my multiplication problem. So negative 1 times 0 is 0, 0 times 4 is 0, 0 times 2 is 0, 0 times 3 is 0. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, 0. One thing I do want to talk about with that y-intercept, that step right before this step here, you don't have to show that step. If you just want to take those numbers and multiply them straight through in your calculator, I'm fine with that, okay? But let's talk about graphing 0, 0. According to this, I already have it graphed. I do know that my left-hand side is going to open down according to my end behavior. So I'm going to start at the bottom, start working my way up. I got to curl back over to get to that point, curl back over to get to that point, and curl over to get to this point. My left-hand side is supposed to end up down. My right-hand side is supposed to end up down. They both do, so I am good. I need to check my turning points though, right? I had 1 turning point, 2 turning points, 3 turning points. So I have 3 turning points. I am good. You do not need to put those stars on your 3 turning points. I'm just doing that so you know where I'm looking while I'm working on the video. Okay? Now, problem 4. There's something different about problem 4. We're not going to get into it just yet. Let's look at our leading coefficient first. Our leading coefficient is what's in front, which is nothing in this case. So our leading coefficient is just going to be positive. Now, my degree. This is when that squared is going to come into play. X minus 1 is going to actually happen 2 times because of the squared. So I have 2 plus x plus 1 happens once, so 2 plus 1 is 3, plus the x minus 5 happens once, so my degree is going to be 4 again. I had 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So that's how I get to a degree of 4, which means that my degree is even, which allows me to do my end behavior. X approaches negative infinity, which is my left-hand side. X approaches positive infinity, which is my right-hand side. Okay? My y approaches, and my y approaches. Even, same, okay? Even means everything needs to be the same. Well, my y's then will use the leading coefficient sign, which is positive. So on my left-hand side, as x approaches negative infinity, my y will approach positive infinity, which means it goes up. And on my right-hand side, x approaches positive infinity, y approaches positive infinity, which means that will also go up. So I'm going to finish on both sides of my graph, moving up. Okay. The number of turning points is 1 less than the degree, so 3. Now I need to go ahead and find my x-intercepts. Because x minus 1 happens twice does not mean I have to solve x minus 1 equals 0 twice. I'm still only going to solve that once. So x minus 1 equals 0, add 1, x will equal 1. X plus 1 equals 0, subtract from both sides, x will equal negative 1, and x minus 5 equals 0, add 5, so x equals 5. Now I want to find my x-intercepts, so my x-intercepts would be 1, 0, negative 1, 0, and 5, 0. I do want to draw your attention to 1, 0. It comes from x minus 1, which if you look up here, x minus 1 happens twice. What that means is at 1, 0, I'm actually going to bounce off of that point. I'm going to bounce off the point 1, 0. You'll see what that means here in 1 second, but let's go ahead and finish graphing our points, which were 1, 0, negative 1, 0, and 5, 0. Okay. Now I need to find my y-intercepts, or my y-intercept, which up here I have negative 1 times. Now since x minus 1 happened twice, I have to use negative 1 twice with my y-intercept. Then I have positive 1, and then I have negative 5. So negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Positive 1 times 1 is positive 1. Positive 1 times negative 5 would be negative 5. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 5, which is right here. All right. Now, this one's a little strange because of the way our graph is going to end. It's not that big of a deal, but my graph needs to start up to the left. So if I start up to the left, I'm going to go down. I'm going to go ahead and touch my y-axis, come back up. Remember that point is 1, 0. 1, 0 came from x minus 1, which came from x minus 1 squared. So that means it happened twice. When I get to that point, I'm going to bounce off that point. Now I'm going down. I can have 3 turning points. I've used 1 turning point, 2 turning points. I need to finish up, right? I need to finish up. So I can add 1 more turning point to this. So I have 1, 2, 3 turning points. I finished both sides going up. So I am good, and it is done. Now, the most important things to remember here are how to find your x-intercepts. The x-intercepts, we just solve each one of the parentheses for 0, solve for x. Find your y-intercept. I'm just going to take each number from inside the parenthesis and multiply them together. And remembering your end behaviors, that is the rules list that we actually figured out in the last video. If you know those things, this graphing stuff in this lesson does not get overly difficult. But if you're still having problems with them, please come in and see me, and we'll get you straightened out. All right. Thank you very much for watching the video, and have a great day.